How are
How you
you?
doing? Good.
You are a trooper for doing this again with me after I screwed up the recording the first time. So I
No, it's
appreciate
no
it.
problem. Yeah, no
Um,
problem.
that's great. When's moving day? When do the kids come back?
So we have our split season team plays on the Labor Day showcase next weekend. So
Oh,
they have
great.
a game. I'll go down and do a little meeting with them just to kind of go over some expectations for the fall. And then they play their first game Thursday night. So some of our hockey guys will be, in the area next weekend, but then the rest of the new students will arrive on Wednesday, September 3rd.
Yep. And then it's
So,
just I was like those first couple of days are like drinking out of a fire hose, right? Like I
yeah,
mean, crazy how quickly it gets on you. Like yeah,
yeah.
those first couple of days. So
We
um,
do a we have our all of our new students do a 2 night orientation hike.
oh,
So
cool.
if you're not one of the leaders on that trip, it actually is it's kind of interesting because you have like a really busy day for the better part of the morning and the early part of the afternoon, just getting everybody situated. And then around like 3 o'clock, all of the new kids go out into the woods. So there's and
Yeah.
the returners aren't back yet. So everything's like dead quiet for 2 days on campus. So it's kind
Yeah.
of a nice time to get caught up on whatever you need to do to get ready for the first week of classes and stuff.
I worked at a school where we did that as well. And like I was always nervous as a admission person, like, hey, these kids just got here and then we're sending them
Yeah,
off. Like I was always shocked at how great that was for kids. Like when they
yeah,
got back, how much more comfortable they felt like in the environment and at least they know some other kids. Like I think
right.
it's an awesome thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, so for your fall team, so who do they play for? So like what organization are they with?
It's so the Islanders, Mike Busconi, who's the head coach for Winchendon, he runs three separate. I don't know if he's running three this year, but last year he ran three separate U18 Islanders teams.
Yeah,
Um, so his Winchendon guys, all their name is U18 Islanders East, and
yeah,
then our team is U18 Islanders West, which is all Holderness kids. And last year he had a group that was called U18 Islanders North. And I don't know if they were a national bound team or if it was, but I believe it was mostly NMH kids and then a few random kids from other schools.
yeah.
So I don't know if he's doing that North team again, but he's definitely doing the East and the West.
Got it.
So Winchendon's East and we're West.
Got it. So, and that's going to be great. Like, how many new guys do you have on the hockey team this year?
A lot. So we graduated, can't remember the exact number, but it was around 12 or 13 from this past year's team. So, around that same number of new players for this year's team. So, um, yeah, it's a good way for our guys to get to know each other and get some chemistry going, during the fall months before our regular season starts. And I think they also love the opportunity to try to make nationals if they do well enough.
For sure.
They get a little bit of a hybrid, AAA schedule mixed with the prep school schedule, which is, I think it's a good selling point for our school.
Yeah. And then once they're back, you guys will start for the guys in fall hockey, they'll start their practices at Plymouth State. How many days a week are they doing that?
Yeah, so we do every Tuesday and Thursday morning, we rent ice from Plymouth from 6:45 to 8 a.m. and
Okay.
we hire two skills coaches to run those for us. So the kids each pay a couple $100 for the whole fall, and that covers the costs of the coaches and we help with the ice time as well.
That's great. And how
Yeah.
many games roughly will they get in the fall?
So on the weekends they'll play usually two a weekend, Saturday night and Sundays, and then if they're doing a showcase event like the Beantown or the Labor Day event, they might play three or four in one weekend. So I think they have to play 25 to be eligible to make nationals,
Yep.
or at least to play in the Massachusetts state tournament. So I think they have to get in around 25 games during the course of the 8 weeks or so.
Yep. I've said to a bunch of coaches, and like you know this from your time, like as a player in prep school,
Yeah.
like the the evolution of fall hockey, and I guess not just fall hockey, right? Like my son's a soccer player and like they're gonna do spring soccer, but like the evolution of the expansion of those opportunities for kids um is so different than when I was in
Yeah.
prep school, but even in the early two, I coached up until 2013, and at that point it was still like the big concession we made then was like, well, we'll put the ice down in October and you can skate on Saturday or Sunday on a rink. So it's awesome now what like some schools, including you guys, are doing for these kids.
Yeah, and I think it's part of its necessity, right?
For
To
sure.
keep up with the Joneses, as they say, with regards to practice availability and time on ice that these other programs are offering kids to do. Whether it's a hockey academy or, just staying with your local AAA team or what have you, where they are playing, 4 or 5 days a week, starting from late August until, whenever, early April. So it's a way for some of these more traditional prep schools to stay competitive in the market, to get some of these high-end players that want to get as much ice time as possible.
Yeah. I noticed too for you guys, I think I guess for lack of a better term, right? Like the evolution of the hockey program at Holderness has been pretty amazing, right? Like I think when always had a good and strong competitive program, but I think you would know better than I. I don't know whether it's like the last maybe 5, 6,
Yeah,
7 years where you guys have kind of jumped into what would be that smaller group of teams that every year you're kind of expecting to be in the playoff hunt, right?
yeah.
And for, like that I think I'm not wrong, right? A lot of that I think coincided with you sort of being there. So what were some of the changes for you that like you made to now elevate the program to where it is?
Yeah, so I think Holderness did have some seasons kind of around 2011,
Yeah,
2012 when they were contending for the small school, for 2 or 3 years
yeah,
consecutively, and it had some really good seasons. And then for the 2 or 3 years before I took it over, they had had a couple really bad seasons. So the
yeah,
program had kind of dipped a little bit. So part of my, kind of enjoyment, I guess, if you will, or motivation to take the job was to try to get us back to being a contender, at least at the small school level. And hopefully, I think every program has a dream or a goal of trying to contend for the Elite Eight at some point, at some level. So that was kind of my goal when I took it over, was to try to get us back to that point. And then, obviously once you get there, it's even harder to keep it going
right.
here. Um, but it's certainly have had a lot of things kind of just come together at the right timing was huge in terms of growing the program. I think, number one, having the new rink, which paired with the NHL doing the Winter Classics that they've been doing, it's made the outdoor appeal of our rink, I think, a little bit more popular than it might have been,
Yep.
back in the early 2000s. And having it brand new in 2015, it's the outdoor structures is pretty state of the art. So I think that's gotten a lure, to players now that maybe it didn't, 20 years ago. So that was a big piece. I think, we hired Joe Gaudette, who did a great job with our defensemen and a lot of our special teams work over the last 5 years. Unfortunately, he just took a job at Exeter, so he won't be with us anymore. But he was a big piece of our success in the recent years. Um, I think from an admission standpoint, we put a lot of resources into our winter sports program. So, financial aid dollars and the ability to go get some high level players that maybe the school didn't put as much attention to 20 years ago. So although I think the winter sports here have always been a focus
Yeah,
point.
for sure.
Um, I think too, just in general, like I think more families, hockey's becoming a wealthy sport, and
Yep.
I think more families now can afford prep school or are
Yep.
maybe more willing to pay for prep school as it relates to hockey than maybe they were, so you have more players in the pool to go try and see and recruit from. And that mixed with players all over the country that want to come to prep school now that maybe markets that weren't there again 15, 20 years ago, players from the West Coast, players from the Southeast part of the United States that are good players and if you do a good job with recruitment, you can find these kids that want to come to prep school that maybe didn't. So there's a lot of different pieces that came
Yeah.
into play, um, that's led to our competitiveness over the last few years. But um, yeah, I think the big one obviously is recruiting, right? You got to find the players win you games, right? So you got to find the players that are gonna help you be competitive in that landscape. So we've put a lot of attention into recruiting, number one.
Well, and that's what when I looked at your roster, right? I thought what's like interesting about it is like if you look at prep schools, there are I think all of them have, some diversity, right? Like they tend maybe to be a little bit Northeast heavy. Um, for you guys, I think it's like 10 or 12 states that you like last year's team you had kids from, but then also, you know, I think you had students from China, the Czech Republic,
Yeah,
Canada. And so yeah, what's that process been like? Like I would imagine, and we'll talk a little bit more like I have a specific example of like for me, I know I have more and more families that are actively seeking Holderness, but like are you finding those guys from China and the Czech Republic, or are they like how are they finding you now?
it's a mix. I think we definitely rely on people like yourselves who we
Right.
trust to work with good families and good players that will reach out to programs that they have a lot of respect for and try to market their clients to us. So that's been a big help from a recruiting standpoint. I think we'll definitely get out to tournaments and see kids play, over the summer and into the fall months. And I think being close to Boston's helpful because there's a lot of
Yep.
really high-end tournaments around Boston where you have teams from all over the country and even all over the world that come here to play. So you can see some kids from a lot of different markets. Um, so I think those are the two big ones is us getting out, seeing kids play, and then also relying on, hockey advisors or consultants to reach out to you and say, hey, I got a kid that I think would be a great fit for Holderness. And then you
Yep.
then you do your homework on them. Um, and then, you do occasionally just get the random player who reaches out who you'd never heard of or
Right.
know anything about.
Yep.
And again, you do your homework and turns out to be a really good kid for your school and for your program. So it's kind of a mix of those three, I would say.
Yeah, and I've noticed for me, like I've always known outside of hockey like Holderness to me is an unbelievable place, right? Like has a place like really strong academic reputation. But I think you guys have always, from an admission standpoint, been really thoughtful in like being able to serve like a really good range of kids and obviously some really unique programming, not only I think academically, but within the outdoors program. But I felt like when I was on the admission side, there was, I guess, for lack of a better term, like a group of kids that were going to be, hey, wanted to be kind of in those northern schools, or were just going to be focused on Lakes Region schools, and Holderness would be on their list. Now, at least for me, I know with my clients, I've seen now, in part, certainly, I think because of your academic reputation, also certainly in large part because of the hockey program, I now have kids who maybe traditionally we're going to look at, you know, Taft and Hotchkiss and Berkshire, and on the eastern side we're going to look at St. Paul's and Andover and Exeter, who now are, coming to me and saying like, and one of the schools we want on our list is is Holderness, and like
Yeah.
I think that's a big change, and also from and not just a hockey recruitment standpoint, but from an admission standpoint, that's great. But it also presents these different challenges of like, you know, separating yourself from now a much larger group of schools than maybe it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think, and I pointed to this, I tell this to a lot of families that come through. I think one of the biggest changes with our school from when I was a student here, which I graduated in 2004, so, just over 20 years ago, it is the academic profile of our school now. I think
Right.
we were always known for being a good school, but I think the amount of AP courses that we offer now, certainly honors level courses, and just the number of electives in each subject area are far and away more and better than when I was in school here. So, Phil Peck, our former head of school, retired maybe 4 years ago, did a really good job of growing the academic program at the school during his tenure here. And I think it's opened many doors for families that are seeking a higher level education, that maybe weren't considering Holderness 20 years ago. But then I think the school's also done a great job of kind of staying true to who we are.
Yep.
We use the White Mountains and the outdoor landscape with a couple big lakes nearby to our advantage, and kind of own that and say we want to be, great academically, certainly have some team sports that we want to be competitive with, but the outdoor piece is something that we're going to strive to be, top tier in the prep school world in terms of offering skiing and, mountain biking and whitewater kayaking, rock climbing, kind of all of those outdoor
Yeah.
adventure opportunities that some schools can offer because they don't have the facilities or the landscape to do so. So, um, by doing that, kind of those three together, we've kind of we target. I think we have a pretty good target market that we go after, but also, it gives us a unique experience, I think, that some schools, can't offer.
Yeah.
But certainly a competitive landscape, right? Especially as the tuition continues to go up and up. I think for any great kid, you're going to be competing with lots of great schools for that individual. So, um, I think it's an ever-changing market, and you just try to do what you can to stay competitive, but any great kid that you're going after, you're going to be up against some good schools or programs that you're contending with to get that kid.
Yeah, and I think about like for me, the group of boys I had who looked at Holderness last year was interesting in the sense of like I definitely had, some who were like through our process made the decision of like, hey, we want the kind of, small or medium-sized school, like that's going to be the right fit, right? Yeah, and I think a place where I think in all of those smaller schools, there's that balance of like real academic challenge, but also a level of support that you might not find at larger schools. And I think Holderness does that incredibly well. But I also had at least I can think off the top of my head two or three boys, including the one who's joining you, who like their list was, largely comprised of like the 10 schools and
Yeah,
bigger schools and places that, I think historically have that academic kind of rigor and reputation. Um, and for, again, thinking specifically about the boy I have who's enrolling, right? Like he had those type of options, but ultimately for him, it was about, that sense of community, some of those options and opportunities that like you guys have that no other school have, and then obviously your hockey program that kind of drew him there. And so it is really interesting for me of like even within my own client base, I've got this, you know, group like these almost two kids that on paper would look totally different who are
yeah,
all drawn to Holderness. So it is this
yeah,
really unique thing.
yeah. It's pretty cool. It's. I think with anything, in the business world, you want to be multidimensional and be able to offer, various programming to meet the needs of a lot of different types of people. And as I said, we definitely know who we are and stay true to who we are, but we also want to be competitive in lots of different areas to be able to attract a lot of different types of people and with different interests. So, again, I think if you can do that as a school, you're going to really help yourself from an admission standpoint, be able to attract lots of potential students for your school.
Yep. And I also think, correct me if I'm wrong, right? When you were a student there, but I even know like when I was coaching probably into the early, 2000s, it felt like maybe there was a larger number of, because in part because of location, a larger number of Canadian kids who were coming
Yeah.
down to play hockey. And are you seeing that? Well, I think part of that is now, I would imagine, right? Like because of how attractive the school and the program has become, as we talked about, like your your ability to choose domestic players and have some of them there, I think is larger. But also, do you think it's a shift with those rules in the CHL that have lessened those numbers, or what is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a combination of a couple different things. I think one thing when I started coaching, which I didn't really know much about, and learned over my first, 2, 3, 4 years here, is if you're bringing a player down from the Quebec area who's already completed their 11th grade year and then
Right,
decide to repeat, there was a lot of NCAA clearinghouse issues with those types of kids who wanted to play Division One. So that became a challenge for us. So we tried to really do our homework on kids' transcripts and what that might look like if we brought them down for a repeat 11 year, because we didn't want to pigeonhole them once they
right.
were here, to maybe not being able to play Division One and have to go play Division Three. So that was something that I tried to be careful about with recruiting from that particular area. So with that challenge, I think we started to see, instead of having 4 or 5 kids from Quebec, maybe just one or two.
Yep,
Then, I think another big focus point for me was finding different markets within the U.S. that we could go find players from as well. So we started getting kids from Arizona and the Midwest even. Like you don't really think about like this year we'll have a player from Minnesota. Really hard to get a player from Minnesota
yeah.
to do a New England
I saw
prep
you
school.
guys had like
So
4 or 5 from Michigan last year,
yeah,
right?
Michigan
Yeah,
was another market that we kind of got into in the last couple years. We did start to get a couple kids from Ontario, which we didn't
yeah,
typically go to as much. So, to your point of Holderness being like historically mostly, well, not mostly, but a good handful of kids from the
yeah.
Quebec area, just because it's, we're only 3.5 hours from Montreal. So logistically, it made a lot of sense for
Right,
us to have kids from that area. And and as you know, and probably a lot of people in the New England market know, it is hard for us to get, a stud from Massachusetts because there's so many good schools around the
for
Boston
sure.
area that those kids can go to. So we've always tried to, within the New England region, focus more on the Vermont kids, the Maine kids. So naturally, you look north, to the Montreal area for those players. But again, I think just with more markets in the U.S. now that you can pull kids from, um, we've gotten a little bit away from going up and focusing solely on Quebec as a recruiting market for us. So we'll still have, probably one or two, over every couple of years that are from that area that certainly look here, but definitely, trying to expand our reach within the US as well. And I do think with the CHL now, with that new ruling, you're probably going to see less of those high-end players from the Quebec area, and the Maritimes look at New England prep schools.
Yep.
They're probably going to, and if they do, they might do it a younger, as a 14 or 15-year-old versus a 16 or a 17-year-old.
Yeah, well, that was going to be kind of my next question because in talking to coaches, like I think certainly over the course of this summer, right? Like I think no one has the crystal ball of like with that CHL change, what all of
Yeah.
that means. I have like in these conversations felt like over the course of this summer, the prevailing thought of a lot of coaches is exactly what you just said of like, hey, because of all these changes, like the higher level talent for us might now start to be those, 14 and 15 and prep hockey just generally starting to get younger and potentially even significantly younger 5 years from now than it is now. Are you starting to see that yet, or do you think it's still a little bit of a ways away for you guys?
It's hard to say. I think
Yep.
we'll see how the next couple of years go before you can accurately, I think, make a determination on that. I think it's pretty rare with what you saw last year with like a Rivers, for example, where you had, 309s, three freshmen, be
St. Mark's
stars.
too was really young. Like, yeah,
Yeah, like be stars in the league. I think it's not, I think when you have that many young players, it's going to be tricky to be that competitive year in and year out. You might have a rare year like last year with Rivers, where you have so many high-end young kids that you can do it. But if you're relying on that as your sole way to be competitive, I think that'll be hard. Um, so like with us, we'll probably try to find a balance of trying to find maybe some unknown older kids that get overlooked or maybe developed late that not a lot of the top level junior programs know about yet.
yep,
And balance taking some of those kids so that you do have some age to help you compete. And then also maybe try to find, one really good young player that can help
yep,
you be competitive or two, but not have you half your lineup be ninth and 10th graders.
yeah.
So that's probably where we'll go with that is try to find that mix still. But, it's hard to say. I do think you'll see more older, juniors and seniors in these prep schools that have had good prep seasons start to leave early. And
Yep.
that's always been, I think, an issue, but I think you'll see it more now than you have historically. I think in the last 10 years, you might have seen a lot of players leave after their junior year and not come back for their senior year. Now you might see some kids leave after their sophomore year and not come back for their junior and senior year. Depending on what type of play, that takes a
Yeah.
pretty unique player to do that, but I think you will start to see more of that than maybe you have in the past.
Well, and I think also with the uncertainty, I know for a lot of like the higher end like kids I've talked to or who are beginning this admission process, like the the very legitimate question around like reclassifying and does that make sense? And I think kids wanting and families wanting to now have potentially more flexibility on the back end than maybe was, but probably wasn't as needed. Certainly when I went and even when I was coaching, but I think it is a reality now. Like my sense is ultimately too, the league might just inherently get younger because I do think there's going to be less kids
Yeah.
for all who are going to be doing that, right? So like even
Yeah.
those kids who are graduating and coming and playing for 2, 3, or 4 years, I think are might be a year younger in terms of graduation than they were 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's another element too. I think that we'll see how that goes, but I do still have a fair amount of families asking
Yeah, for
that are
sure.
excited about repeating. So I think with those families too, they probably have a big picture view of the importance of everything outside of hockey too. It's not, I think the kids that are solely focused on the hockey piece, you might not see repeat as much as they used to. But for families who are still weighing heavily the experience of the high school, academically and extracurricularly, and maybe kids who play other sports too, besides just hockey, still wanting to do the repeat year. But if you have kids that are solely focused on the hockey experience, then they might not repeat as much as they have in the past.
Well, and I think the other part of that challenge is like, you know, I talked to Kevin Zepiel at Berkshire and
Yeah.
they're living this now in terms of like, I did admissions at Berkshire in 2003 was a really different place. And then even 2013 for them of like, and you guys are seeing this too, as you become more popular, not just with hockey players, but
Yeah.
right, it's your applicant pool starts to
Yes.
grow. It inherently now becomes like, there's just less space, right? Like, and as a
Right.
smaller school. And so I'm always talking to families around the idea of like, yes, like having the conversation around like what is our ideal hockey timeline? We absolutely should. The reality though is like, hey, like, I know talking to you or David Flynn, like it's not crazy now to think about me calling you and you guys saying like, hey, we're over enrolled for ninth grade boys. Like
Right.
we can't take him as a 10th grader if he wants to be here. He needs to repeat nine or he needs to
Exactly.
and like that balancing is, you know, I think that in some ways, for particularly as a coach, like you wear both hats as an admissions person
Yeah.
and coach, and like the growth for Holderness in terms of the applicant pool and selectivity is great. It
Yeah.
also creates some inherent challenges in terms of like it's now harder just to be able to go out and get those guys you may have wanted.
For sure. Yeah. Like I think for us being a smaller school, um, we usually take about 60 ninth graders.
Yeah,
So, I think the biggest challenge for us with recruiting older players is you might only have 5 junior spots open in the whole school.
right.
So, to go try to find 3 true juniors that are hockey players, you might have half of the kids that want to go in as a junior. They're only going to be able to come if they repeat grade 10 because
Right.
there's just not enough space in the junior class to take that many older players. So yeah, I think the hardest thing for me from a recruiting standpoint at Holderness is maybe trying to tell a family, hey, you got to come as a repeat 10 versus 11. That 10th to 11th grade
Yep,
class gets pretty tight quickly. It's a little easier if you're applying for ninth or 10th.
for sure.
So, and then certainly as post grad, it's tight for space too. So, if you're bringing in 69th graders, we might take 15 to 20 new 10th graders. Suddenly your class is at 75 or 80, and we don't want to graduate any more than 85, to 90 kids a year. So if you do the math, it gets real
Yeah.
tough as
Well,
you get
and when
older.
I do
So,
that with parents too, like I have
yeah,
that conversation of like, hey, um, yeah, so a place like Holderness, right? Like they're going to take, you know, I'm always like talking to them a little bit about acceptance rate and yield. I'm like, so hey, if they're going to try and enroll six new 11th graders, maybe they're going to admit eight or nine
yeah,
11th graders. And family's initial reaction to that is like, oh, that seems okay. And I'm like, no, that's total. And that might also be both boys and girls,
right,
right? Like, so part
right,
of it is like what we're really talking about is like their target is like three 11th grade boys. And, in addition to wanting to be attractive to those really high-end talented students who are going to make significant impacts in the classroom, it's your soccer program and your lacrosse program and your hockey program. And like, yeah, so for me, it is that balancing act, as you said, of like, I I think the question I get oftentimes from families before they start working with me or before they engage in the admission process is that like, well, we think we should wait until he's an 11th grader. My response to that is always like, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. And I'd be lying if I told you there weren't opportunities because there absolutely are going to be. But the reality is, like you guys just said, if your ninth grade class is 60, your target's 30 boys. I would
yeah,
imagine for you guys that means you're accepting 45 or 50
yeah,
boys to get your
yeah,
30. Where like as an 11th grader, as I said, like what are you accepting? Seven
yeah,
boys like
right,
into your
right,
11th grade class? Like
yeah,
so it's just a different animal that I think sometimes, you know, families don't necessarily see it. And I also think, as I pointed to Berkshire, I think Holderness is another example of this, of like, broadly as the school has become more popular and gotten more selective, that's now it creates inherent challenges in terms of like recruiting as a coach versus, as I said, like you also have this broader job of like managing or helping to manage the entire applicant pool, and that's a
right.
different animal.
Right, yeah, for sure. And again, that might eventually lead us to your point of being younger. It
Right.
might lead us to, kind of try to go younger with our recruiting. But I think Flinney in our mission office has been great about, trying to he values athletics and wants the athletics teams to be as competitive as possible. And provided that their academic, that each applicant's academic profile is strong. Um, so, we're still going to have opportunities for older kids, but at the same time, you have to be real selective and limited on the kids that you take in those upperclassmen years.
Well, and I also think too, like again, thinking about the clients I had, right? Like the the bar, both in terms of like not only hockey, but academically just becomes so much higher because you guys can
Yeah,
be so much more selective, right? And I think I know as an
right.
admissions person, you can look at a kid who's coming in as a ninth grader, and if there's a couple of blemishes, it's this idea of like, well, we'll have time, and in our environment, like we can
Fresh
grow,
start.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and we can help support him as an 11th grader, as you talked about, like like the college process is right on him, and
Yeah.
so it's much harder now to say like, well, we're going to have time for to recover if maybe he did have a C, like hey, there's going to be less time for that, and so I think
Yeah.
it inherently is just a more selective process there.
For sure. For
um
sure.
are you seeing now for you, and I'm curious, and it's obviously still new for your, I guess your higher end guys, right? Like those guys you have who have Division 1 interest or are on that track or even going to be really good Division 3 level players. Is there at least, I know we've only been through it 1 year, but I'm curious even about this summer, like are you seeing more of an inclination towards some of those CHL and Canadian junior routes versus the like USHL, which obviously, historically had been the place, right? Like if you're a really good prep player, you're going to go play in the
Yeah.
USHL. Have you seen that starting to shift like already for some of your kids?
Yeah. I wouldn't say so much for our team. Like we don't have any, and I think partially part of that is we have been a little bit older.
Yeah.
But I think some of the like if you look at the New England Hockey Journal just posted an article
Yeah, I just saw.
with the younger prep kids that are up at the Q prospect camps, or they probably call them rookie camps, and the number is significant. So, whether those kids decide, if they make the team decide to go this year or postpone it a year, you're certainly starting to see, more and more kids from our league go up and do those camps and have aspirations to play in that league, I think. Um, USHL, I think will always be a competitive
For
market for our
sure.
players too. I think their league has the history and the nostalgia for our players to still want to go and play in that league. Um, BCHL will be a question mark. I think that was
Yep.
always a league that a lot of prep kids aspired to play in, and we'll see if that stays competitive in our landscape. But yeah, I think if you were to look at we don't see too many kids that from the West Coast that would play in the WHL, but with the OHL and the Q being an opportunity, I think it'll be between those two leagues and the USHL for the three that are our top level players are thinking about playing in if they have the opportunity to.
Yeah, and I think about it too, like if I were a kid, right? Like and outside of even the hockey piece of it, like thinking about it broadly in terms of like education and life experience and all of those things, like I think that it does present a really unique option and opportunity that wasn't available
Yeah,
obviously to me or to kids. And so to have some of those experiences, like I think yeah, it is, ultimately I don't know whether it's good, bad, or I'm indifferent about like that it happened. The reality is now it has happened. And
yeah,
so it's um I think it's easy to talk about what kind of the implications and now it's going to be hard and all of that is true. But I think to your point earlier, like I think as a parent or doing what I do, like as I'm always trying to talk to families about, like, I think I'm continuing, and Holderness is a great example of this. I think a lot of times with families, you get so focused on like the outcome, right,
Yeah.
versus the experience. And like I'm
Yeah.
always preaching this idea of like, hey, if we find the right school and he goes there and he has a great experience academically and socially, and the right hockey opportunity is going to be there for him, he's going to be happy and there's going to be opportunities for him
Yeah.
coming out of it. Um, Experientially, like I think some of those opportunities for kids are really interesting. Like I
Yeah.
think it'd be really cool to get to go play and like I don't know to graduate from Holderness and get to go play in the Quebec Major Junior League for a year or two.
Yeah.
Like that's a
Pretty
pretty
pretty good
cool job.
attendance in that league. A lot of
Yeah.
people watching you and fun environments to play in, just like
Yeah,
in the
like
NHL.
so like I don't, I think it is. No one knows what the path for these kids is going to look like, but I do
Yeah.
think that, like, for me, the idea that there are, yeah, those options of like some
Yeah.
great USL teams and things like that, like it is pretty unique.
Yeah. I do think part of our education process when we're talking with families, particularly ones who are in a rush on the hockey side of things, is, from someone who's lived that lifestyle where you're playing 65, 70 games a year and on the bus a lot and hockey is kind of your job. It is nice, I think, to go into that experience having kind of checked your boxes with all the other pieces of your high school experience all
For
set and
sure.
ready to go. I think it can be a challenge, particularly for kids who aren't great at managing their time or managing their own schedules,
Yeah.
um, to keep up with if they're still in high school and trying to play in these leagues. Practice times don't always align with when you'd have your classes. I know a lot of places are going online now, but that environment might not be the best for a lot of kids to finish up their high school experience in academically. So I do think there's a lot of allure still with and benefit to finishing their high school experience before going to play in these leagues. And you'll still have, even if you repeat, you'll still have 2 years to be able to do that experience if that's something that you want to live. So, but to be able to live that experience fully and not have to worry about, getting your math homework done on the bus on a Thursday night when you're traveling 10 hours through the countryside
Yeah.
is, I think, something that we try to market with our families as being a benefit to finishing up school first, before you go off and do these teams and these leagues. But I think for the select few players, it might be a benefit to them to leave earlier rather than stay, but I don't think it's the majority.
Yeah, I agree. And I've said this to a few other coaches. I still think like one of the huge values of the boarding school experience or the prep school experience for kids that like I don't know if parents think about this as much, but I certainly I'm living this with my own son who's a highly competitive soccer player, right? Like it's from a very young age, these kids, I feel like they get on the track of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And like, I'm going to work really hard and then I'm going to get to the next level and I'm going to make this AAA team and I'm going to make this AAA team and then I'm going to go to prep school and then I'm going to go play junior hockey and then I'm going to go play college hockey and then I'm going to play pro. Like, part of what I think prep school still offers and Holderness does a great job of this is like, you are going to be forced to step outside of that for a
Yeah.
little bit, right? Like, and for you guys, you're going to be pushed to explore some things intellectually in the classroom that maybe you've never done. And you're going to be pushed to try some outdoors activities that maybe you never thought you were a part of. And for me, I think the real value is like, not only for some kids, maybe they find a passion or interest that they never knew they had, and that's what they want to pursue, and that's success. But I often think that like for kids, like I think the great thing about it is okay, now when you're graduating and the opportunity for you to go, as you talked about, play 65 games and ride a bus and do online classes and do all of that stuff is in front of you. I think the reality for some kids now becomes like, well, now you're making the choice to do that because you know you love it, not just because it's the only thing you've ever done, right? Like I
Yeah,
think for some kids to be able to say like, hey, I went to Holderness and I tried another sport and I did some outdoors programs, right? I did the overnight camping things and I maybe joined the play or I took these classes. And I don't love any of those things as much as I love
right,
hockey. So I
right.
want to do this versus feeling like, which I think some kids do feel, right? And like I saw it when I was coaching. I'm sure you've seen it with like
Yeah,
these kids who are like, well, I've never done anything else, so I feel like I just have to keep
right.
doing this. Like, and to me, that's a huge value
Yeah,
of the experience and completing it.
yeah, for sure. I totally agree. And something as simple as going to like a school dance on a Saturday night.
Yep.
Some kids who are going to play in these junior leagues at 16 years old, like they're not going to have those social experiences that, the majority of high schoolers get to have. So, um, there are a lot of benefits to the social part of prep school experience too, in terms of developing your character and social skills and just, networking outside of the hockey market. You might, you know, end up working in the professional setting with somebody that you met at Holderness that has nothing to do with hockey at all,
Yeah.
whereas, when you're going to these junior leagues that are super hockey focused, yeah, certainly you can network there too, but you probably not being exposed to as many different people as you would be with many different interests as you would at a prep school.
Yeah, I've said this before, right? Like I was lucky enough to go out and play Division I college hockey, but like to this day, my the strongest relationships I have and the closest friends I have are people I graduated from
Yeah,
prep school with, not
yeah.
not guys I met later in life. And so there's huge value in it.
Yeah, one thing I tried to do when I was in school at UNH playing was, being a New Hampshire guy, I had a good amount of friends that were from New Hampshire
Right.
that went to UNH that weren't involved with hockey at all. And I always tried to room, my roommates were always somebody that weren't on my hockey team because I
Yep.
always wanted to be more balanced with, hanging out with people outside of just the kids on my team. Certainly you want to spend time with your teammates too, but I think it's healthy to have other friends as well and be around other people that maybe don't want to talk about hockey or want to
Yeah, for
be
sure.
um, hearing about how your practice went or whatever. So I think that's a healthy part of a boarding school lifestyle too.
Yeah, well, and as you said, like I don't know as whatever you're an 18 or 19-year-old if you're at UNH, if you hadn't had the experience at Holderness, whether or not you would have the perspective to know that that's a good thing for you to
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
right? Like, and just inherent, like you said, like that decision is one that like is really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think yeah, as we get near the end, like what's your team look like for this year?
Yeah.
And what does that look like for you as we start thinking about the fall of
Yeah.
26?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about this group. I think we are going to be, to your point of getting younger. I think we'll be, at least in the last 3 or 4 years, probably this will be the youngest team that we've had. We'll have a
Yep.
good amount of 10th graders who are mostly '09s. We'll have a freshman on the team, which we haven't had in the last couple of years. But still a good mix of some older kids too that will balance some experience and who have played a good level of hockey wherever they're coming from. Um, so I'm excited about the group. We return our starting goalie from last year, who I think will have a big year for us. And arguably two of the better defensemen, I think that certainly were on our team last year and within the Lakes Region Conference. So I think we'll have, kind of a good top pair on D and then pretty good depth up front. So I'm excited about the group but
Yep.
at the same time for the fall of 26, I'm looking forward to not having to replace,
A
12 to
ton.
14 kids like we have the last couple of years. It's a little bit more of we'll be able to be a little bit more selective with a smaller group of kids that we'll
Yeah.
be looking to replace the outgoing senior class with. So we'll be looking to bring in, assuming that no underclassmen leave early, which you
Yeah.
always might face. We'll probably look to bring in four forwards, two defensemen, and one goalie. So,
Yeah.
seven or eight kids I think is a great number of players to be targeting, on the varsity level for the fall of 26. And then we're always looking for a handful of players that can play on our JV team too. So,
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I know as we, even as I continue to go back about this idea of like the popularity of Holderness and how much it's grown, like
yeah,
I think I don't know what it is, right? I've already had two or three families this summer, right, who have been on and like, hey, we want to be so far ahead of it. Like Holderness is
yeah,
a place that we want to go up and see in July or August, and like I I don't know that like would have been the case, right? Like 5, 7 years ago, particularly when I think about the profile of those kids that have been up to see you already. So yeah. Um it's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much again for doing this
yeah,
again.
yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it. And yeah, we'll keep in touch and good luck with the start of school.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate the time.
All right, thanks, man.
See ya.
See ya.